Greetings, friends. This is Jana ESP with Philosophy, and today we're going to be tackling some very challenging intermediate to advanced philosophical concepts. And this is dealing with a branch of metaphysics known as theology, or transcendental metaphysics, the study of the ultimate being. And what happened is that in the scientific revolution, they wanted to dismiss theology because it was so connected to Christian dogma, and they saw that as myth and belief, and any concept of the higher reality is just simply nonsensical. And this started kind of this scientific materialist reductionist paradigm. And a lot of this came from the doctrine called nominalism, and nominalism simply rejected that there was an objective reality to universals. The problem is that we can't make transcendental metaphysics go away. Whether you're a philosopher studying on your own or you're studying other philosophers, these transcendental concepts are going to come up over and over in all different civilizations and all different cultures. And that is because these philosophers are not making up these concepts, they're actually discovering them. And nominalism is a false ideology because the universals do have reference in objective reality. It's just different than the way that individual in particulars. It's a different aspect of reality than the individual in particulars. Don't worry, there's enough room in reality for both the mind and for matter, and Aristotle reconciled this by saying form and matter, and the composites, the intelligible structure, and the substance. Even later, we see with the postmodernists after modernity get confused and have a lot of kind of garbage. Like if you read Derrida or Deleuze, it's so abstract, and it's because you can tell that they are philosophers and they're yearning for that transcendental, but they're trying to explain that transcendental in a way where there's no transcendental, and it's just so contradictory and confusing. Now, the first thing we can say about the ultimate reality is that it's eternal, it's immutable, it's unchangeable, it's static and fixed. And it was Parmenides, one of the pre-Socratic philosophers, that went into this. And later, Plato borrowed from him. A real quick note, we are just talking about the ultimate reality. We're not going to be talking about the relative unless we need to prevent certain errors from occurring. So in discussing the ultimate reality, there are two important types. And you're going to see this in the East and the West. In the East, you're going to see it in Hinduism and Buddhism, in China with Taoism, and in the West, you're going to see it in the classical era, and especially in the medieval period. And these two types are the unqualifiable. Okay, so you see this more in the East actually than the West, but okay, the first is the unqualifiable, and the second is the qualifiable. And for example, in India, in Hinduism, Brahman was what they called the ultimate reality that has no qualities, and Ishvara is the ultimate reality that has qualities. At first, you might say, so the ultimate is unqualifiable and qualifiable. How does that work? And I think what can help is if we use Ken Wilber's three-pole model instead of the two-pole model. The two-pole model of rationality is rationality and non-rationality. The three-pole model, Ken Wilber's model, is pre-rationality, rationality, and then trans-rationality. And he describes this developmental unfolding with the principle of transcend and include. And so trans-rationality transcends rationality and includes it. And we can see that the ultimate, the unqualifiable is transcending the mind, and the qualifiable is including the mind. So there is rational aspects to the qualifiable. Let's first start, though, with the unqualifiable, which is beyond conception, and the Kabbalion speaks of this, which is paradoxical. The Hermeticists believe and teach that the all, which is the ultimate, right, in itself is and must ever be unknowable. They regard all the theories, guesses, speculations of the theologians and metaphysicians regarding the inner nature of the all as but childish efforts of mortals to grasp the secret of the infinite. Such efforts have always failed and will always fail from the very nature of the task. So the unqualifiable is undescribable, right? And in China, we have Lao Tzu say, I do not know its name. I call it Tao. So in a sense, we cannot go further with this because it's the unspeakable. But philosophers are always trying to give it a name. I mean, we just saw Lao Tzu say he doesn't know its name, and then he calls it Tao. And this is the compulsory nature of the mind to identify and define, right? And what we're saying here, in including all aspects of transcendental realities, is that there is a mental component to the ultimate, and that is the qualifiable part within conception. And within conception, we have certain principles like duality, and in aspects, the many aspects of the one. At this point, I want to make the note that many attribute the concept of non-duality onto the ultimate. And, there's a correct way and incorrect way to do that. The correct way is when we define the ultimate reality as unity and as oneness. And, which is the absolute. And Parmenides said, what exists must be absolutely or not at all. And so that's why sometimes we will use the concept of the absolute or the term absolute interchangeably with the ultimate, which are essentially the same concept, different terms, same concept. Blah. And this brings us to the fundamental duality that Parmenides discovered. This guy was pretty damn cool. And this is going to allow us to discuss the unity and the oneness of the ultimate, as well as incorporating the duality of the mind. And this fundamental duality is between reality and illusion. And we're going to put the errors of non-duality on hold until the end here. And what we are arriving at here is the concept of the absolute positive. And Plato, in a large part, was responsible for that in making the highest reality the good. And that was because he studied under Socrates, who was really against moral relativism and saw that as ignorance and evil. And so moral philosophy actually was had its inceptions in Socrates, in the beginning of our tradition, which is pretty crazy because moral relativism is so damn popular these days. But anyways, we're getting back into that we need to reconcile this problem between unity and duality, right? And we can by saying in the qualifiable aspect of the ultimate that the all absolute positive has no real opposite. Its opposite is just an illusion. And this brings us to the popular spiritual sayings that we have, where love is all there is, fear is just an illusion, right? And then get my chart. So this is reality, and this is an illusion, and at the ultimate level that's true, but then you have to be careful because in the relative level these polarities both exist, and essentially though evil and chaos, evil only exists in the temporal transient reality. This is not eternal, thank God, right? So this is what's eternal. And I think in knowing that is part of the good side of faith, right? It's knowing that, no, the good is the shit. In classical philosophy, we have three main positives: being, truth, and goodness. But of course we can add the others, as you can see here: sovereignty, knowledge, order, freedom. Oh, and love. Of course, I'm so mind controlled, and I leave that out last. I should have said that first. But like in my other videos, I talked about how love is not really mentioned that much in philosophy, and that is for a reason. This brings us to the question, why the positive over the negative? And this is because any astute person, seeker of truth, of philosophy, will recognize through observation of nature and reality that there is a preference towards the good. And this also has to do with understanding natural law. And I highly recommend watching the Natural Law Seminar by Mark Passio, which I'm just going to keep mentioning until you do. We basically live in a positive universe. We evolve and grow through the good. That's why evil and badness is destruction and death. This is all the death side, right? even if you don't understand that there's natural law, there's a preference towards the good, if you take the wrong actions, you are going to enslave yourself. You are going to cause suffering onto yourself. I mean, including others if you're violating others. And this is all, this is the anti expansion and growth. That is the natural direction of the space-time universe. Erroneously, people can think that being objective is to not have a preference for good and evil. But this is why we need to make the distinction between a positive bias and then the perception of reality as having a natural preference towards the good. A positive bias is something that the pseudo-spiritual New Age camp does in projecting its positive wishes and desires, onto the world, instead of trying to recognize what is in the world. And and so you have a complete psychopath, oh, but you're just a being of light, right? And yeah, this is not good. So, but there is a positive preference in nature, and the universe wants this, and it's guiding you towards this, so that when you're not acting in alignment with it, you're going to have some struggles. If we keep being evil as we are in our society and manifesting this, we're going to get wiped off the planet. The universe doesn't want that. It's not what we're here for. We're here to experience joy and bliss and abundance and harmony and all these great things. It is a positive universe. But a positive universe demands that we take right and moral action and not violate other people's natural law sovereign rights. So we're going to talk about the preference of the positive with the three branches of philosophy. With metaphysics, we have being is prioritized over non-being. With epistemology, truth is higher than falsity. With morality, good is preferred over evil. Starting with metaphysics, they saw the ultimate reality as this eternal being, this ever-present and perfect being. And later in the Christian period, it was related to the ontological argument for God's existence. That perfection is being, so it must exist. And if I can conceive of it, it must exist. And this is the idea that our concepts of these higher realms, there's validity to it. And here is another way we can describe the ultimate duality. We talked about it being reality and illusion. Well, another way is being and non-being, being and non-being, presence or non-presence, existence or privation. And so the positive is what is being, negative is non-being. I'm going to read a short passage from this book, Socrates to Sartre, about a lesser-known philosopher in the medieval period who was a student of St. Paul called Pseudo-Dionysus. The knowledge of God, and when we say God, we mean the ultimate reality, says Dionysus, can be approached in two ways, a positive and negative way. When the mind takes the positive way, it ascribes to God all the perfect attributes discovered by a study of creatures. In this way, the divine can be given such names as goodness, light, being, unity, wisdom, life. Dionysus indicates that these names belong in their perfection to God and only in a derivative sense to man, depending upon the degree to which the creature participates in these perfections. And so here he's borrowing from Plato's concept of participation, and this helps reconcile the issue between the absolute good and the relative good. And we say that the relative good is only participating in the absolute good to some relative extent, right? He also goes on to deny the positive existence of evil, which the other theologians of the Middle Ages do, starting from Augustine, who calls evil as being the lack of good, to Saint Aquinas, who says evil is not a thing but the privation of good. So we see that this is really the absence of this. In saying that this is all there is, there's unity, but we still have the concept of duality because that's something that the mind can't get out of. Remember, we're talking about the qualifiable. Now I'm going to get back to the errors of non-duality, and that occurs when we define non-duality as an attribute of the ultimate reality as being the transcendence of opposites or the negation of opposites. And some school of Buddhism will do this, and they'll say that the ultimate is neither being nor non-being, And then we have postmodern existentialist Nietzsche saying, speaking of transcending good and evil. Okay, I had to answer a phone call, so I don't know exactly where I was, but I think I said that Nietzsche was about transcending good and evil. And, you know, with this Buddhist school, with some postmodernism stuff, you're opening the door for nihilism and the elevation of neutrality. And this is because you're attempting to qualify the unqualifiable aspect of the ultimate. You're confusing the unqualifiable and the qualifiable, which is why I'm going into great detail to explain that difference. The reason is because to say that the ultimate is neither duality or to say that it is duality, you're creating another duality between duality and non-duality. And now you're starting to get into some mind games, and this is what we want to avoid, and some contradictions. And this leads us back to the Kabbalion when they say childish efforts of mortal minds to grasp the infinite. Remember, if we are going to talk about the unqualifiable aspects of the ultimate, then we don't want to say that it's non-something, because even saying that is saying something. You know, we could just say it's the non-conceptual part and stop there, right? And not continue to play the childish games. So hopefully I presented a way to handle these delicate issues by just taking stuff from philosophy, you know, it's not, you know, and stuff that I've discovered with, you know, through that studies. And that is that we can incorporate duality in the mind if we're talking about the conceptual qualifiable aspect of the ultimate. And this duality is reality and illusion. Remember, being and non-being, presence and non-presence. And we incorporate natural law into it by, you know, because we are in a positive universe, so that we want the ultimate level to be positive as well. And we have, you know, the ultimate positives, or the absolute positives, however you want to call it. And in this way we can eliminate the contradictions. Oh man, I'm a little bit nervous about how convoluted all of this is going to be in the comments, but I hope that the few of you that are really serious about philosophy may have gotten just a little bit of value from this. Thank you.